Welcome to the podcast, Entrepreneur Perspectives, thinking through your business and mine, one podcast at a time, a CADSource production. In this episode, I chat with Glenn Boothe of the Influx podcast. This episode exists because of CADSource. CADSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at CADSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting CADScontent.com. Glenn invited me to be a guest on the Influx podcast. He made it easy as Glenn brings energy and conversation and a lot of tech equipment. We discuss many topics, including starting out with content, podcasting, and creating for the right people, not all the people. Now I'll hand it over to Glenn to lead this episode, and be sure to subscribe to the Influx podcast on Apple.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 9 of the Influx podcast. As you know, our mission is to help you tell your story, and today's guest totally embodies that. Eric Kasimov is founder and CEO of CADSource, and he lives and breathes storytelling. So this episode is a little longer than usual, and we cover a lot of ground. Here's a few highlights you can expect to hear about. Number 1, your blog or podcast does not need readers or listeners to be a success. What you learn from doing the work is payoff enough. An audience is just icing on the cake. Number 2, your content, message, views, etc. aren't going to resonate with everyone, and that is a good thing. Don't waste any time trying to convert the unconvertible. Number 3, people don't buy from you because your content talks about how great your products and services are. They buy because they like who you are and what you stand for. Talking about leadership and business and family and values leads to amazing relationships, no matter what industry you're in. All this and more coming up. Let's get into the show. When I was coming over here, I was thinking about, I'm going to ask all the selfish questions because you've been podcasting for a while now.
Yeah.
And I want to learn from you, right?
Sure.
So
yeah.
Everyone that listens to it in our crowd is going to learn from that for sure. But I'm thinking, oh, nice. I get to pick Eric's brain and pick up all these tips from you consistently doing this for, how long have you been?
The first podcast we put out would have been 2017. And I started listening to podcasts a while ago and had just never really thought about it for a while. And I was like, wait a second, I'm consuming the content. Why aren't I on the production end of it?
Yeah.
So that's, because you got to put a microphone in front of you. Now you have to actually know what you're talking about. So you have to think through it. It's nerve-wracking, right? If you've never done it before, you're like, what am I going to sound like? Who's going to listen to what I have to say? And then you just start doing it and it becomes a habit. And it becomes a way to learn a lot. So it's like, wow, you can learn a lot about yourself. You can learn about your speaking habits. You can learn about the type of questions you ask. You can learn about other people. So if you're trying to go down the self-betterment track, just like you just said, if you want to learn about podcasting, go talk to someone else about podcasting. Say, hey, do you want to be in my podcast? And they'll say, yeah, I would love to do that.
Right.
That's an incredible leverage component to it as well. And it's authentic because you do want to learn, but there's other things and you want to tell other people possibly what I'm doing. But I still think it's authentic. If you do it authentically, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And people will want to talk to you and they'll say, Glenn, can I be on your podcast? I'd love to talk to you about that.
Yeah. And you really just brought up a main thing, which is the am I good enough question. And I want to get into that.
Yeah.
But we got ahead of ourselves a little bit because it's what we do.
Yeah.
Let's just start off with, who are you? What do you do? There's a bunch of brands. There's a bunch of stuff. So just give us the lowdown.
Well, it depends who you ask. What am I, right? To your dog, you're the one that feeds me and takes me out. My wife is like, take the dogs out, right? That kind of stuff. So, but for the sake of this podcast and what I do, created a content marketing company in around 2015. And coming from the insurance industry, realizing that messaging was bad in that industry and it's boring and it's dull. And it's like, how are we going to get some attention to what we're doing in an authentic way? There's that word again. And I just started thinking, what am I interested in? Well, I'm interested in business. I'm interested in the business that I'm in. I'm interested in entrepreneurship and growing a business. And I'm thinking through things. And I'm interested in sports. And so anyway, started creating a blog. So just said, I'll start writing about it. And I don't know if anyone will read it, but I'll read it, or people on the team will read it. So we started really creating content. Fast forward, and I'll go back to that a little bit. But the way I look at it is we help business leaders create and share content. Well, what does that mean? Well, what kind of content we want to help others create? And I think when you talk to an entrepreneur or a business leader, someone that's out there, they have these amazing things that they know or have learned, and they could be young, they could be old. And I think they have a story to tell. And that's kind of going back to where I was. That's where I was. I'm like, no one cares what I have to say possibly, until you realize like, well, maybe one person does care. And that one person is really all you needed. And you find out maybe there's some more people. I did it for myself. I did it for this company. We did it at this company together. And I went down this journey and I said, I could help others do it. But I didn't know that until someone reached out to me and said, I like what you're doing. Can you help me do that? Well, that's amazing. So I just created this content. Someone came to me, and there was obviously a lot more to that conversation, which actually started on Twitter. And it led to more messages and emails and phone calls and meetings and more and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, well, someone saw our content that became proof of concept to say, can you help me do that for my business? So what we do is what we've done here, we now do it for you. So we continue to do it here. We do it for you. If it's good enough for me, it's good enough for you, is how I look at it. And I think it's an amazing journey to watch different people that we've helped in some small way, because let's be honest, they're the brand, they're their own talent. If we can help them and get them to the next level of whatever that might be or wherever they are in their journey, it's awesome. I love it. I just enjoy talking to someone like yourself.
It just feels good, right?
It does feel good. And let's be honest, like it's all going to work out in the end. We have to make money. We have to grow a business. We have to do the things that we want to do. But if I can build a business that allows me, the company here, the people that we love to have here to create, meaning, yeah, we have to pay bills. We have to do certain things. We have to eat. But I look at it like entrepreneurial artists. So we get to create. So we're building a business that allows us to create more, create for ourselves, create for the person that we work with. And we get to talk to entrepreneurial type people all the time. And there's just this vibe that when you have this, like you talked about before, when we first sat down and started talking, it's like we're listening and hearing, we're reading the same people. Let's do more of that. That's fun. You learn a lot. So it's going back to that self-betterment. And then you just start thinking about all these different things. How can I help this person out? How can I help that person out? And as a result, it helps our own company out. So,
yeah. So at that time, it was all written content, blog posts mostly.
Yeah. So all blog posts, it was about sports and business, called it Sports Epreneur. So I took sports and business and combined them together and really just created analogies around sports and business. And it's evolved. I see more of like an intersection of sports, business, life, entrepreneurship, thinking. It just continues to grow into different. It's just, what am I thinking about? What do I see? I like to collide things. So if I can see a sports and I can collide that into a piece of content, whether it's a blog, but to answer your question, it was all writing at the time.
And Sports Epreneur was the first place you started writing, or did you start writing as the insurance company?
I wrote a little bit as the insurance company, but didn't really know what to talk about and who's going to pay attention. And so we were showing up. So we work the insurance business still exists. It's a separate business inside of CASSource Insurance. And we work with wealth managers, property and casualty agents, insurance agents, and we do insurance distribution for them and their clients, right? And the thing is, we'd be showing up to these advisors' offices, and I was like, well, we sound just like a lot of other companies would possibly sound. And it's just not an exciting conversation. I'm getting tired of it. I've been doing it for a long time and had a lot of success doing it. But I didn't want to continue just to build that. There's more. Like, what is more? I don't know, but I knew there was more that what we could be doing. Well, what if we had this content and that content was the introduction and that content could be about sports? Well, people like to talk about sports. It's a great icebreaker along with many other things, right?
Yeah.
And so they came in and said, well, that's interesting. I like this content. Oh, no, by the way, you do life insurance. I need to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
That was the door opener. And it was a little bit that, but it became more of, I see what you're doing. Can you help me do that for my business? Which is the content. You could hate sports, but you could like our writing style, or you could like the way we design the website, or you could like just the way things look and feel. And you're like, I know I need to do that. I want to talk about traveling or hiking, or I want to talk about my legal business or whatever that is. I need someone to help me do that and create a story around it to then whoever your audience is that they'll want to talk to you about it.
Right. Did you try to bridge the insurance business and the sports, or was it really business and entrepreneurial lessons that you see on the sports field? Or was it like, how closely tied was that? Because in the beginning, I'm sure you were like trying to tie it to insurance pretty tight.
I was thinking about it. It was funny because I don't know, this is just something people have seen. So you see the movie, The Social Network, and he talks about Facebook and they're creating Facebook. And they were talking something about what is the end goal here? And Mark Zuckerberg, the actor in that, is saying, this is never finished. There's no end. This just keeps going. And that's just something people have seen the movie. They might remember that scene, I think, in their dorm. There is no end to this. It's like fashion. It just keeps evolving. It keeps changing.
Right.
There were times I tried to box it up. And I wrote about this at one point. Because you ask, like, who are you? What do you? It's like, oh my goodness, how much time do you have? Like, and you ask like all these, and I get it. You can, we create and share amazing content, that type of thing. I get it. But there's just, I don't know, it's hard to box it up. But at times I was trying to box it up. So what does this mean? So this content is going to lead to this. I eventually realized is just write, just create. And I would go in there and I would come out of it. Once I realized it, is just create content. The things will happen. So just create. And that could be the attention to a wealth advisor that says, I want to talk to you. That could be the person that comes in and says, I saw what you wrote and I would like to hire you to do that for my business. And so at the beginning, yes, I was trying to tie it in, but they're separate. I mean, separate websites. They have nothing really to do with each other. They're more tied in now, just different brands of the CADSource company.
Yeah. When did you get to the point? So a couple of people approached you. Can you help us? You were excited because it's kind of work you love to do.
Yeah.
At what point did you decide this is a company? Like, I'm going to go create a content marketing company.
It was early on. I kind of saw it before the first person probably came. Like, I want to do more of this. And I was starting to hear from people and they were saying, you really like this, don't you? Like, you could just see if you have a passion for something, like you spend a lot of time thinking about it. You spend a lot of time writing. You spend a lot of time talking about it. Is this something you want to spend more time doing? And then I started getting those hard questions like, well, if you had to choose, what would you choose? What would you work on the most? It's like interesting. So it makes you think a lot. And so I think it was probably beforehand, but 2015 is when I say that started evolving. To 2016, it was like clients and working with more and more and starting to think through it more and building out that aspect of the business. And then the podcast started following after that, just realizing because I was reading. So I was thinking about my journey to becoming a business owner. So going back is my younger self would laugh because I didn't like to read. I read things that I enjoyed, but I didn't really read. I didn't really listen. I just, friends and sports and business and whatever. But I knew I wanted to go out and build a business. So what did I have? So I really started getting interested in reading. So I started reading and I was like, well, what is this thing? So you can listen to this podcast while I walk my dog or my kids, my babies at the time. And I could do that. And that gave me good, positive stuff to think about because at the time it's like my dog had died. We had our third child. My third child was in the hospital for a week when she was a month old. That'll change you a lot. And I remember after that, I wasn't feeling great. I wasn't feeling right. You're stressed out. You're anxious. You're like, man, I'm not happy where I'm at right now. My business, I'm at a large company. So I haven't started my business yet. And sure enough, I wake up one morning and I get a call from one of my clients and he says, you guys just got bought out by a large bank in Charlotte. And I was like, what are you talking about? I had no idea. Really? My company just got bought out by BB&T, and BB&T's a good company. It was like, I live in Charlotte. I don't want to work for a bank. Everyone works for a bank. I don't want to. Sure enough, I work for a bank overnight. So anyway, during this time, you have a lot of stuff going on. And I realized what positive stuff was happening from podcasting and thinking and going through these things. And remembering that as I got further along with CADSource is I want to create content. I want to share because this helped me a lot along the way. I was reading these different things. I was listening to these different things. And I just needed to get up the nerve to do it is really what it was. And to not care what someone would say. Like even a friend would be like, you're creating a blog. What are you doing, dude? You're like, yeah, kind of stuff. And you're like,
even today, I still get that. I'm sure you do too.
Absolutely. Or people didn't even know you, or they knew you had it. They might say something to you offhand. Like, I didn't know you listened. I didn't know you, you didn't say anything on LinkedIn, right?
Right. So that goes back to kind of what we were talking about in the beginning is it is scary to get started. And it is really easy to think, who the hell cares what I have to say? Am I good enough? Those things. How did you wrestle with those? Because you have to put it out there before you get the positive feedback, right? So for all those people that are listening that want to do it and are a little bit afraid, how did you kind of process that in the beginning? Or was it you just had the fire and you were just going for it no matter what?
No, I mean, it's, a little bit of everything. One, you have to put your head down and just if you're going to write, just start writing. You don't have to publish anything just yet, but at least start writing and then get it in front of some people, see what they think. I think what's kind of cool, you can find one person. Who's the one person that thinks, man, this is really good? Like one person you trust. And I don't know, maybe it's your mom, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your aunt. Yeah. For me, it was, right. I remember my aunt, like, it's just hilarious. We have a fun relationship like that. And she just loved it. Right. And it doesn't matter who is that. It could be your business partner. It could be a client of yours. It says, no, man, you should do this. And I think just having someone that believes in what you're doing doesn't hurt. But at the same time, it's up to you. Right. I think it's just, you have to put your head down. So if you realize, if you think that you should do it, you should just give it a shot. Because I think to be relevant, you have to create, like, what do you stand for? What do you believe in? And it might not be writing. It might be a podcast. It might be a video. It might be pictures. It could be a lot. It might be a speaking event. Whatever the thing is, I think you just have to think about, like, what is it? And it doesn't have to be just so obvious about your business. Like, if you're in law, you don't have to just write about law. You could write about South Charlotte if you live in South Charlotte, or you like traveling and you'd like traveling to California. There's so many different ways to do it, because then they can relate the two. Yeah. There are ways to do it. Or if it's just a logo on the other website, or whatever that might be, or you just talk about it a lot, because then people are going to want to talk to it. Oh, by the way, you do that. I think there's just a lot to it. So it's a challenge. So, I mean, I think everyone's going to have a different way of dealing with it. Putting yourself out there is not easy. It's really not.
It gets easier though, right? Like, if you put in the reps.
Yes. It's a habit. So you guys talked about it on your last podcast with Mike Berlotti, and he had said about just creating a 1 to 2 second video. If you create this habit, it works. I mean, there's a book, Power of Habit, and there's tons of books. There's tons of content about this. It's just science. It's just proven that if you do the same thing, you can repeat it. So if you have a podcast that you put out every Monday and you do that enough times, you'll put it out every Monday. You hold to it. So it's going back to, like, how do I create content? Well, I would say, I think I did Tuesday and Thursday. I would publish a blog on Tuesday and Thursday. Mm-hmm. Now it's changed since then. I don't necessarily have set days that I'm doing it, right. But at the beginning, to get it off the ground, I felt like I had to do it on those days. And maybe those days, maybe it was 1 day a week at a time. Then it was 2 days. Then it was whatever that is. It doesn't matter if it's one a month, right? Just if you stick to that, you create this habit, and it just becomes part of what you do. Because a lot of people have there's excuses, right? It's, well, I don't have time. And I totally get that. That's why companies like you and I exist, because we can help with that. And there's plenty of people that can help with that. You can hire someone overseas if you want to help with that. But I believe it's a habit. And we were just talking about earlier, we had a client that we're working with, and he's reading the book, David Goggins' Can't Hurt Me. And so I was just giving the example of someone who hadn't read the book yet. And it talks about getting calluses when you play golf or you climb or whatever it is, you get blisters and stuff. Yeah. Well, if you do it enough times, you actually get a callus, and now it's not going to blister up anymore. So you have to callus your mind to continue to go every single day. Right. And if you you hear people talking about the ones you hear about: exercise, journaling, meditation, waking up at a certain time, like whatever thing that is that excites that one person. If you do it enough times in a row, it becomes a habit. Like waking up in the morning, it's not much fun, but for the person that can do it every single day at 5 a.m., eventually they'll just wake up at 5 a.m. because their body's saying it's time to get up. So I think those types of things, if it's just this routine. So like in Berlotti's case of what you're doing, if you just happen to pull out your phone every day when you wake up and take a video or picture of wherever you are, if you travel a lot, you're done. You do that 20 times in a row, you're just going to do it every day.
Just going to do it.
So I think that's it. It's putting your head down, doing it, and you have to have this thing of like not caring. But I also think there's this point of people are so worried about what if they don't like it? What if they don't care about it? Which I think is a good thing, because they were never your audience anyway. You're not trying to talk to those people.
Wow, I love that. 100%. What I'm creating just isn't for you. That's okay.
That's totally okay. And it might be later. It might be down the road, but if you start to get into different businesses, there's always someone that's going to come in. Compliance officer, could be your business partner, could be someone, I don't know if we should do this. We might turn some people off. Those people you're turning off, maybe it's a future employee, maybe it's an existing employee. They start hearing your thoughts and they don't want to work for you anymore. Maybe you needed to vet them out anyway, that they shouldn't have been at the company, right? Or a prospect that you were going to go spend 3 hours with. I mean, isn't it that, not to be polarizing? It doesn't mean you have to go and take these crazy takes and who knows what type of stuff you're going to put out there. But I think it's just who you are, and you just share it, because there is an audience that says, no, I like that. I want more of that. And I want to talk to you. Can I have some of your time? Can I have some of your expertise, some of your specific knowledge? I need that for my business. Or let's just hang out, right? And be around good people. But
yeah, it's such a healthy viewpoint. I think it is one of the things that people are terrified of is negative comments or negative feedback. And if we come at it with this perspective of it's not for everyone, nothing is. Think of anything in your life.
Sure.
Hopefully that little message got through to some people, because I think that's what people need to hear. It's really important. You mentioned multiple platforms. Started in writing, obviously before podcasts and video were what they are today.
Right.
Now, I think you're mostly focused on podcasts as kind of your core pillar content. Is that true? How much are you still writing? How do you think about kind of managing?
It's funny, recently, like I've been writing more.
Okay.
But still doing podcasts to do it all. It's been, so I've just seen like, if, they always said like, well, if you start creating content, people will find it eventually, perhaps if it's good, or maybe not. Maybe just one person finds it. Maybe that's the one person you need it. Google's a real place, right? People still go to Google and they search stuff and they find it. And I just had someone in here who's like, I start everywhere with Google. And if I don't find the business on Google, then I don't think they exist. Or if you're not on the first 2 pages of Google, then I'm not interested. Yeah. That's just his perception. It's not mine. It's not yours. That's what he thought. He found our podcast production. We had an article about it. And that's how he found us. It was through Google. It was through SEO. But it was all genuine content. He's like, I liked you guys. That was it. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is all of it. We're creating all of it. Content, writing a lot, podcasting. I would say podcasting is, like you said, the pillar is like a lot of it starts there because you can think through these things a lot. When we're talking, you have to be on a little bit, because I'll re-listen to this and I'm like, what was I talking about there? Or we need to change it. Or no, that's a really good idea. Let's dive in. I'll share it with the team. And so the team can take the podcast. So yeah, I think podcasting is just such an easy way to consume content. And there's so many different ways you can look at it, because it could be for the growth of your business. It could be for internal training for your team. It could be for your existing client base, because so many people are focused on growth, right? But like, isn't it better to, what about your existing clients? Keep the people that you have, keep them happy. Maybe you have an FAQ podcast and you talk about whatever it is that you talk about with your clients, or they ask questions, you answer them on the podcast. That's your podcast. So a lot of it starts with that. And then that can turn into, as you know, you can transcribe the podcast and it can become your blog if you clean it up a little bit. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And when we first started this, we talked about how scripted or not scripted we wanted to be. And both of us have kind of the same style of like, let's just sit down and talk. And that's the most interesting to me, because of what you just said, like you're in the moment, you have to be quote unquote on and paying attention. And that's where the most interesting things come. If I sent you 10 questions ahead of time and you had prepared answers, this wouldn't be that interesting. In my opinion, there's a place for that. And some people need to start there. But I love interview. I think in some ways can be a crutch in podcasts and can get a little bit too easy and an escape. But if you do this and really like explore and you say something, it's like, hang on a second, let me learn more. You can, number one, deepen relationships with who you're talking to, but really get those nuggets out to your audience.
Right. Well, you're talking right now. It's your podcast. You're the one who controls the mic. You control the conversation. You can tell me to shut up and you can just take over, right? But people want to learn from you, or they want to hear you. They want to hear the guest perhaps, but they tune in because of you. You're the one kind of directing it. And I think there's a lot to it. Sound bites are good. What's the context? Where did it originate from? I'm getting tired of sound bites. Like if we have people running for president, where they can get up and they can speak in 30-second or 2-minute clips, or someone can, no. What's their hour-long talk about this? It might be back and forth, question and answer. Like, what do they think about this? And they might not hit every answer out of the park. And I get it. So much of this stuff has to be scripted. But what do you think about it? Like the Joe Rogan podcast. Not to say you got to become Joe Rogan, but go listen to that. There'd be 3-hour podcasts, 2-hour podcasts. They're diving deep. You get out of it, you're like, I am so tired right now. I just talked for an hour or two. We had someone on our podcast and he loved it. So anyway, published the podcast. It was 90 minutes long. And he talked to my business partner. He came in and he said, I think it was too long. And he looked at him. He said, you're asking people to spend, and I don't know what the number is. Let's say it's not a cheap investment of the type of business he's running, but they're spending thousands of dollars every quarter to work with you. Do you think someone's just going to buy from you? And not to say they're going to buy just after listening to one podcast, and they're spending time with you. Like they're actually sitting in a room with him every single month for years on end. They're going to invest 90 minutes to listen to you, to hear about you. Like, wow, that's the type of person I want to spend time with. So I think that allows people to get behind the curtain a little bit to say, what does he stand for? What does she stand for? I want to spend time with that person. I mean, that goes back to one of the first people that engaged us, because they were like, they're in the financial services industry. And most of our clients aren't in that industry, but we do have some in there. But they're trying to recruit other young advisors to come in there. He says, we're lying to these people and they're lying to themselves because we're telling them that they can win. So we interview 400 people. We hire 100 of people. 4 of them are pretty good. 1 of them is really good. Those are terrible numbers. And it's a waste of time. And we're spending all this money. So it's like, why would someone work for you? And they start listing off all their products and services and all these grades. I'm like, that's great. I get it. We already know you have a good company. You have good products. You have good services for the people that like it. what do you stand for? So he starts telling these stories and getting these things out there. And you're like, that's the stuff that people wanted to hear. What did you believe? And he's got this foundation that he created for different things that he was doing. And he's got these leadership styles and these books that he's reading. He's got a way to captivate an audience. That's it. The products and services and all that other stuff is somewhat assumed that you already have that, or we'll figure that out down the road. Yeah. Why would I even want to talk to you? Oh, I get it. Because if I'm going to grow my career, I want you to be my leader. I want you to be my mentor.
Right.
That's it. Nothing to do with financial services. So the compliance office is like, well, if you're going to talk about financial services, we're going to have an issue. But if you're talking about leadership and doing good things and traveling and have at it.
Right.
Not have at it, but for the most part, yeah.
Yeah, it goes back to the old saying that's been around for my entire life is people buy from who they know, like, and trust. And podcasts or video or writing lets people start to get to know you. I mean, it's pretty simple when you boil it down in those simple terms.
And sometimes it's hard. Like, I think with a podcast, I've noticed this. You start getting the feel, you start getting the groove, let's say. You start getting a little bit of a flow state when you start talking with someone else. But at the beginning, and you might lose it throughout. Like, oh man, what am I talking about? I forgot. But at the beginning, it's like, you got to just feel each other out a little bit. And I think sometimes you don't get to some of that good stuff until later on, not just in a podcast, that's just in a conversation in general. And I think as you think through things, there's ways to do it. So it's not going to be that one blog post or that one podcast or that one video might not do it, but you do it consistently over time, and you might update your thoughts or thesis on that topic, but that's okay. Because aren't we here to just, like, you're doing it, constantly refining? We're small business. We're allowed to do it. You know, it's like, we don't have to turn around the Titanic. You see, if you've ever worked for a large company, you see, like, well, we want to get this approved. Like, well, that's going to take 8 months.
Yeah,
so good luck doing that. So why can't we just go and we can pivot as we see fit? And it's up to you. If you made a bad decision, well, you have to live with it. You're the decision maker. But I think we can do that with content and continue to share and create and edit. And yeah.
So now you're taking all this great content knowledge and experience and kind of the results you've had, and you've got all these other people. And we're both in the same boat here, I think, is what we're trying to push people a little bit into exploring some of these different platforms. Are you having good luck having people consider starting their own podcast or do some video content? Like, how successful are you there?
So it's interesting because you use the word push. And I know you don't do this either, but that's an interesting way to look at it. It's that, and you've heard this, right? You can't convince the unconvincible. It becomes a waste of time. I mean, I've sat there before, if you've ever sold anything and they start telling you why am I here then? You asked me here, but you already figured out. So have at it. And if someone is saying, I would never do a podcast, I hate podcasts, I think people who do podcasts are stupid. It's not, and I get it. We're not necessarily talking about that person, but there are people, they're like, in the insurance industry is a perfect example of this, because we came in and they're like, you can't do that. People would say that, and they would look at you funny. You're like, wait, so you create content and you're in the insurance business, and what does content even mean? And then it was like, a podcast? You're really wasting your time now, right? So they would say these things. Well, they were the unconvincible. They would never consider it. Not in a million years. But then you show up and all of a sudden they're like, they start paying attention. They see an email, they see social media, they ask questions. You see them in an event. What are you up to? Oh, I saw your blog, or I heard about this, or you're doing these things. And then they start getting interested, and then people start coming around. So then, I think that's just an example of people that weren't convincible, but over time, and they go to their networking events or their trade shows or their trade magazines, and they start hearing that you have to create content. You have to be authentic. What do you stand up? What do you stand for? What do you believe in? And so, so the people it's not for everybody, but it's becoming for more people. I mean, the stats prove it out. I mean, just watch the acquisitions that's going on in podcasting, the amount of money. So anytime there's a large sums of money that are being thrown around, there's clearly interest in this platform, content, podcast, any type of content, really, podcasting, obviously being a big thing. So I mean, it's interesting conversations to have, but typically we see it like they had to have had some level of marketing in their past. They've done something. They've tried it out, right? Maybe they started blogging, because you and I have both seen this, where you go to a website and the last blog they posted was from 2016. And we could laugh at that, but it's true. It happens all the time. Where I have an Instagram page. I see businesses that they have these things, or business leaders, they have these things, but they don't update it. So it actually is a negative. Because it's like, well, you say you're on social media, you say you do these things, you say you create content, but you did and you don't. Your link doesn't even work. I click on your Twitter page and you don't even have a Twitter profile, but you still have it on your website. You're not paying attention, and people are back checking these things. So they're going to your business and say, I found you on Google. So that's good. That's one. Now I'm going to go check, and I'm going to back check it. So I'm going to go to your LinkedIn profile, and you're not active on LinkedIn. You're not doing these things. You're on Instagram. What are you doing? What do you stand for? And I think more and more people are looking to say, you said it, trust. I want to trust you. I want to see what you stand for. Now, there's still other things. I still got to meet you. I got to shake your hand, or I got to see you on a video call or whatever that might be, or phone call. But are you really there? Are you really doing this? And so people are realizing now that I need to do this. And it might not be a podcast, and that's okay. It could just be a blog post. It could just be update your LinkedIn profile, little things like that. What do you stand for? And then just do that, and just little by little. So we're not here to say, you need to go create a podcast and a blog. It's too much. It's no different than when you started or I started. Like, you just small steps. What's also been cool is we've found people that we started talking to, and they've already created content, but it was in their notebook or it was on their computer at home, and they were journaling and they were writing, and they were realizing like they thought that was just for their team. There are 4 people on their team, and they were sharing it over emails for the last 2 years. And I'm like, I bet you there's some good stuff in there. And he's like, I think you're right. And so before it was like all product and company specific. Next thing you know, they find this and they're like, that becomes their blog post that they put on LinkedIn. And people are saying to them, man, I really like that stuff. It's possible you've already created a lot of this content, and now you just have to curate it. So to me, it isn't even about marketing. It's about content. So all these different tools and social media and LinkedIn, I think what people need to do is just create content. What you do with that content, there's all sorts of things you can do with it. Because what if social media or whatever, internet or whatever, all this stuff just stops to exist, or Instagram shuts down, or LinkedIn's gone? I mean, these things happen. So people were the Instagram experts, or they were the Pinterest. That's fine. Just create content, because the world shuts down. You still have the content.
Right.
And it might be in a piece of paper. It might be a handwritten letter that you send me based on, I thought you'd be interested in this. And it's a gift to that other person to create that stuff. I think it's all about content. And this, if you just look around and pay attention to what you consume on a daily basis, it's all content. Turn on Netflix. What is Amazon Prime doing? They create $1 million shows just so you subscribe to Amazon Prime. And
for
then go to their website.
$49.
Right. But that's it. But they get that. So they get because they have the ability to charge a fee for that content. Yeah. And other companies can do it too. But just pay attention. A sporting event, what are they doing it for? So they can, and there's other business aspects of it. They get to sell advertising on the back end of it. They could create new relationships on the back end. It's to me, it's all about content. So yeah, are you and I going to create the next Amazon? That's not what this is about. That's an extreme example. I think we can take it down to something much smaller, and it could be just the business coach in your local town that creates it that way.
Yeah, I think you brought up a great point too, which is some people are creating content and have no idea. Or maybe they know they're creating content, but it is for this like specific audience internally or whatever. So if they can take a step back and really see what they're doing, whether it's journaling or anything along those lines, even emails that they're sending that they're not even thinking of in that viewpoint, they're probably sitting on gold. And I hadn't really thought about it in that perspective. I'm going to personally take that little nugget away, because I'm always having this conversation of like, I'd love to do this, but I have nothing interesting to say, or I've never created anything, which is just crazy to think about, right? We're all creating every single day. I guess it's the same analogy I always hear. Well, I'm not a salesperson. I'm not good at selling things. I mean, you're selling people on your ideas and your opinions every single day. So, it's another way. I'm going to use that. It's another way for people to think about content.
Well, I think you're not going to become the next Joe Rogan. Maybe you are. Go for it. You're not going to become the next Taylor Swift. Maybe you go. I don't know. Like, we're not here to crush people's dreams or anything like that. But imagine if you had 10 people listen, or zero. Let's say I'll go to the 10 people. 10 people listen to it. What if that one person was the one person that could change the course of your business? It happens. It
absolutely happens.
How many people do you need? I talked to this one person. They were in the fitness world, and they wanted to be huge. They wanted LinkedIn and Facebook, they have numbers. They wanted to do ads, and they wanted to reach all these different people. I said, well, what do you want? So they started talking about their clients, some clients that they had. And this woman listed these 2 clients. And they described this client, the 2 clients, very similar. And then they went to this one client. So it all came down to this one specific client. If I had a client that was like this, that's what I want. And so how many of those do you need? Like 30. I said, then why do you need to reach hundreds of thousands of people? It's just 30. And then to think through that. So maybe nobody does care what you have to say, except for the people that actually do care. And that might be just a few people. Just talk to those people. Don't worry about everybody else. You're not going to get those people anyway. So what are we doing here? I get it. It's frustrating. Like, you put an Instagram post and no one good luck figuring out that algorithm. Like, Google talks about it. Good luck gaming Google, right? But people try to do it. Well, then they'll come in here like, well, we need to do this because this is how I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. Because guess what? Who cares if anyone liked your post? Maybe one person liked your post, but that was the person that you got to have a conversation with and you learned something, or who knows? And it doesn't have to be a game to then get a business deal out of it, because a lot of times we're talking about that. or nobody listens. So go back to zero. Like you said at the beginning, you learn from just having a conversation, or maybe you learn nothing from talking to me, right? Or it's your team. So we had a podcast that we did in here with Tim Kite, who is, if anyone follows football, so he is basically Ohio State's, and he was Urban Meyer's coach. So in 2012, Urban Meyer got there, they went undefeated, but he realized he went to the national championship game. And he's like, wow, we're way behind Alabama. We're gonna have to figure this thing out. And they realized that there was a leadership issue in here. Anyway, fast forward, he meets this guy, Tim Kite, at a cocktail party. And then they met, like, I think a few days after that. And they're like, we need to work together. And he said to him, he's like, Urban, I will work with you and your team, but I have to work with you first. So he started worked on leadership as a coach. And he works with large brands all over the world and all this kind of stuff. And I had reached out to him at one point because I'd heard of him at this time. And sure enough, 2014, they win the national championship. But you could see, like, getting into this, it was all based on the leadership that they had developed internally, the culture of the organization, the accountability that they had in the organizations, in the program, in the football program that they had. So anyway, we have Tim on the podcast recently. Well, that's required listening for everyone in our organization, because the stuff that he was talking about related to all the things that we talk about as we're leading this company. And guess what? If you listen to that and you don't like it, or you think it's just total BS or whatever it is, then you know where you're maybe not in the right place. Or if someone wants to come work here, go listen to this. That's just an example. It could become, right. So no one on the outside listened to it, but your team listened to it, or the people that might eventually listen to it. And you don't know when you got to go hire someone new. Well, now you have all this content that can relate to that, right? So it doesn't have to be about, I want to grow my business. People, I want to 10 times my bit, whatever. That's great. Those are great ambitions to have. What about just keeping the stuff, like I mentioned before, that you had? So this required listening internally. And maybe people listen to on the outside too. So I mean, obviously I believe in it.
Sometimes I think it's a blessing to have no listeners, especially in the beginning, right? That's what I try to tell people too, when they're like, well, what if no one likes her or whatever? Or more so of like, I'm afraid to stare into the camera lens or do something, but you have no viewers or listeners in the beginning. So it's just practice, right? Just go, again, put in the reps. It's so important. And I do get a ton out of just doing it for myself. So if no one listened and no one even gave me any feedback, I would continue to do it. Maybe not forever. I don't know, right? It's hard to put yourself in those shoes. We're lucky enough to like be touching people in some way, at least a little bit. Yeah. I mean, you have to look at it in all those different levels.
Yeah.
Right.
You do. And I mean, I see you come in, you got a smile on your face. I mean, you're having fun doing it. And not, I get it too, though. There's people that say, I have no time for this. And there's no doubt. And you don't have the energy. You don't have the know-how. People look at this stuff because you would say, well, this is really easy. But you handed like the recorder to someone else to be like, what am I supposed to do with this thing? Like, I'm lucky enough. I know how to use my phone. Now, it doesn't work that way. So you have to scale back, or you have to hire someone internally. You go outsource it. I mean, everyone's doing this. You probably have a CPA that you've outsourced to do your taxes. Yeah. You have an attorney. You have someone that cuts your grass, maybe. You have someone that comes and fixes the things that you don't know how to fix in your house. Isn't that the same thing? And it's like whether or not you're willing to make the investment on it. Are you willing to invest in this content thing? And maybe you're not right now, and that's okay. It's just like you asked before. There are people that are not there. That's fine. But maybe they will be there. And I think there's just so many different things that we can do. And I see it even with like people who are in an older generation to say they're not seeing it yet, but they're realizing they're not going anywhere anytime soon. Like they might not want to work forever, but they actually do want to work. They just don't want to do the job that they're doing. But they learned all of this stuff through all the years, how much they can give back. You start seeing them, they start mentoring. They like to help other people out internally at their company, maybe. Those are the types of people, they can go create it. Imagine if they created a blog or a podcast, then they get hired to become a speaker. And like, there's so many things that can happen as a result. Going back to the question on like, what did we expect sportspreneur to become? Or did we have to, you don't know. Because you don't know when someone might call you up to say, I want to talk to you about that. I want to talk to you about writing a book. I want to talk to you about training our team. I want to talk to you about creating an internal podcast. Yeah. You don't know.
So you are currently producing multiple podcasts internally.
Yeah.
Multiple properties where you're writing, plus you're helping some of your clients do this stuff. How are you managing the workload?
Not easy. Yeah.
Time management.
So team gets involved, right? Time management. It's tough. I've been thinking a lot about uninterrupted time lately. So I have not read Neil Stephenson's book. He's a sci-fi writer, but I've paid attention to it, and I'm not a sci-fi reader, but I read a blog post. I came across it, and I think I found it. I think Tim Ferriss had shared it out somewhere. So, it's like one of those things that you just kind of come across. And he talked about he needs uninterrupted time. So if you want him to write the next great sci-fi novel, if you're into it, he needs that time. So he tells the people, that are in his life, the people that he loves, it says, I need this time to do this. So he realizes there's interrupted time. Have at it. What kind of questions? What do we got to do? Let's go with the uninterrupted time. And it's different for everybody. I think the point is, as someone who's creating a lot and has a lot of ideas and it's like kind of like thinking visionary type stuff, you can really get yourself, what am I supposed to do next? Because I could pick a number of things to do. So anyway, that's also making sure that you have people on your team, whether it's internal or outsourced, that can help you do it. And also deleting things. As you know, there's all productivity stuff. But how are we doing it? Well, you had mentioned like pillar content before. So the original podcast is Entrepreneur Perspectives. That was the first one. I just wanted to talk to entrepreneurs. I feel like there was no right or wrong answers to a lot of things, but there's these perspectives that exist out there. I just want to talk about those perspectives. You might say, I hate social media. That's great. I'm not here to tell you right or wrong. Let's just talk through it. I think blogs are done, whatever that might be. What are your perspectives? But it got deeper and deeper and deeper into just all these stories and why you actually are the way you are, why you do the things that you do. Well, anyway, those became long form pieces of content. So it's like an hour, like I said, 90 minutes. Well, that becomes snippets of content. So that could be a minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Well, then in every episode, inevitably, if nothing to do with content or content marketing, let's say, we might talk about content. Like they might have a website. They might have a podcast of their own. Why did you create a podcast? We talk about that for 5 minutes. Well, I said, well, why don't we have a podcast? We call it Content Matters, ends with a Z for the CasSource brand, but it was about topics. It's the fact that content matters, and it's matters is like a words, like a play on words. It's about different topics in the content marketing arena. So we talk about that, we pull that, and that becomes a podcast episode. It could be 4 minutes long. That's that episode. So you didn't want to hear some long form thing. You just wanted to hear a 4-minute snippet about different content topics. That's what that is. That was that. And then the Sportsepreneur podcast that we have, was like, well, I'm writing a lot and it's taking a lot of time. Can I just turn on a mic and just start talking about it? Because then once you start getting into it, I'm like, well, I just talk about it now. Or I could go interview somebody, or we could go get that person on our podcast because they're, Tom Murphy plays for the Seattle Mariners and is a catcher. And I watched him at bat and they said he played baseball at the University of Buffalo, where I'm from. He's literally at bat. I'm on Instagram. I just was like 10:30 at night. I don't know what I'm doing. And I messaged the guy and I said, Tom, I was just watching you at bat. And I see you're off to a great start this season. I have a podcast. I would love to talk to you. And he's like, it was like the next day, he's like, that'd be great. And then we had some back and forth. And then next day we had this conversation. And then you take that with this amazing conversation and you learn about his story and you learn about what it's like to be a baseball player. Like he got traded the season before and he's got wife and kids and are like, I just got traded. So I got to fly here to fly there. It's like, you get these real stories and you get how genuine people, anyway. We started talking about it. So that became that podcast because I want to have these conversations with these people. Maybe no one else listens to it, but I talked to Tom Murphy and it was really cool. And it's like opens the doors. And John is going out to Sacramento. John on our team here, he's going out to Sacramento. His girlfriend's working or is in school there right now. And he's going to meet with hopefully I get this right, the Sacramento River Cats. That's the name of the AAA baseball team. He's the general manager of the team. And he says he knows Tom Murphy. He looked at our stuff to see, oh yeah, I would love to talk to you. You know Tom Murphy. Nice. He doesn't know, so there's like these different connections. So they're related. And honestly, we use the podcast interchangeably. So like if we have someone who's sports related on the Sportsepreneur podcast, but they can relate to being Entrepreneur Perspectives, it might be 2 months later, we'll repurpose that there, different intro, outro, mentioning it, totally different content. Yeah. So reframe it. But it's similar content, right? So just different ways to do it.
Yeah. Are you sometimes taking the whole piece or are you really editing that down?
Both. It depends. It depends on the percent. Yeah. So we've say if I had a 40-minute conversation, but it was like, here's 15 minutes, this 15 minutes, and then frame it and then explain it in the blog post in different text. So how are we doing it? We have people here, right? So we have graphic design, we have video work. We're not a video company, but we could do some video work. But that's where we worked with you. So we had a client of ours and they were doing this event and they wanted high quality video work. And we're like, we know someone that does high quality video work and then we work well with and we trust and we would like to bring them in. And so you and I are talking on the phone. I think you're out of town. You're like, I'm there. Let's do it. And so there's different ways to connect with people and to create all this different content. But then, so we have podcast editing, websites and, but again, if we're saying that you can outsource your stuff, well, we're going to make connections as well with other people that can help us out. Because at the end of the day, it's about bringing the best to the client. And I've always lived in that world of bringing the best to the client.
Yeah. How do you handle so you just said you're doing some podcast editing for some clients. Are you recording? Are you taking equipment and recording? Are you coaching them and, hey, here's a couple different ways you can capture content and then send it to us?
For now, that's the second one. So we're guiding them along on what they should have. Like there's different levels. Like you can grab a USB mic and plug into your computer and you can start basic, or you can go get a Zoom recorder, right? And you can do it that way and we'll show you how to do it and we'll help them out. So it's a combination of those things. So we're not like showing up with the equipment. We could, if someone wanted to use it, we've talked to people. We have not done that yet. We're saying we'll help you with the strategy and the ideas and the thinking through it and, how to get guests on if you want guests or all those things. But more or less, you handle the actual audio. We take the file. And so we do all the pre and the post.
You doing consulting on the front? Here's some great topics.
Absolutely. Strategy, think through it, talk about it. It's like having this kind of conversation. Like, what are you interested in? What are you thinking about? What's the purpose of this? Or what's the purpose today? And what do you want it to be? And, all those types of things. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we just had a meeting this morning, kind of like an hour and a half conversation with a client. And that's it. I mean, but it evolves. And then inevitably they're going to go home and they're going to think through some stuff. Like, I had this idea, or I heard this podcast and I really like this. And we talk about that. And there's constant strategy is huge.
Once they get a little momentum, not them, us, right? I feel the same way. Even get a few episodes in and all of a sudden you're noticing things on the day-to-day that maybe didn't stick out to you before. And you're like, that would be a great thing to talk about, right? And no one knows what the heck to talk about, but just get a little bit in the groove, in the practice of it. And all of a sudden there's more content than you can even imagine, right? There's no shortage of things to talk about. But most of the people that I talk to say they have nothing to say.
Well, it's when they go down that, you said it, right? You go down this journey. At the beginning, it's really hard. And then you start going down this path. And I've watched people do it. They love it. They want to do more of it. They want to spend, that's what I did. So some say I lived it. So I witness other people now doing it. And it's really cool to see it. And it doesn't happen overnight. And I'll tell them, I was like, you should tell that story. We had a guy and he was, again, he's talking a lot of corporate stuff, business, and that's fine. And I get it. And a lot of people want to understand that and recruiting and these different things. He told me the story that he was in a bar and he's a bartender and these two guys walked in and they had these nice suits on and they talked well and they're just good guys. And he chatted with, he's like, what do you guys do? He's like, well, we're financial advisors. And he's like, I want to do that. And he didn't have the means. He didn't think to do something like that. And he said, I'm going to do that. And then he tells a story from there. I'm like, that's the story people want to hear. Even if it's the most successful advisor that's out there, that's some realness to it. Like that's raw stuff. I want to hear that story, not the buttoned up version that we, maybe it is today. I want to hear that type of thing. If you're willing to talk about it, if you're not, I get it. That's fine too. But I think most people are. The picture that goes viral, Jeff Bezos sitting in his office and stuff's all over the place. And now it's like Amazon.
Amazon's written in crayon on a big piece of paper.
Yeah, I like those. Yeah. It's extreme examples again, but it's like, hey buddy, go to the bank next door and make sure our line of credit doesn't close. So Amazon doesn't go out of business this afternoon. Right. And it's, wow, that's real stuff. People are going through these things. And again, it doesn't have to always be the rags to riches stories. It doesn't have to be a sob story. It could be entertaining. It could be funny. It could be about your kids. It could be all these different things. And so, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good spot to end it. So where is the best place for people to find you? Where's the entry point? I know you got starting a bunch point. Of them. Where's the starting point?
KazSource.com I would go to, and that's got all our brands and different content. And then you can connect with me on, probably most active on LinkedIn. So just me there, and Twitter. But yeah.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks, Eric.
You got it. One of my favorite things about KazSource is the opportunity to chat with amazing business leaders and entrepreneurs. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to connect, you can find me on LinkedIn or visit us at KazSource.com. Thank you for listening to this KazSource production, Entrepreneur Perspectives, building and protecting your business one podcast at a time. This episode exists because of KazSource. KazSource is your content team. You know how many business leaders need help communicating their story? That's what we do. Content strategy, creation, and distribution for business leaders. This provides opportunities, relationships, and a platform for you and your business. Why do we do this? Because at KazSource, we exist to help you create and share amazing content. And yes, you should have a podcast. We'll help you. Learn more by visiting KazContent.com.